She arrived at the grand estate under a silver sky, clutching her modest clutch as faces in elegant gowns and sharp tuxedos brushed past her, like whispers of a world she never belonged to. The air was thick with champagne bubbles and hushed laughter. But inside her chest, a silence pressed heavy. Alone, a single mother, unseen among the elite. She told herself she had no right to be here. Her name was Isla, and today, the wedding of a childhood friend had pulled her into a life she longed to forget. Every shimmering gown, every polished smile, was a reminder she was an outsider now, a woman who had fought unimaginable battles to carve out a life for her son. She stepped into the dazzling ballroom, the chandeliers casting fractured light that seemed to mock her simple dress. A sea of whispered gossip and judging eyes swirled around her, unease knotting tighter with every step. She caught the gaze of a few subtle sneers, the silent question hanging in the air. What was she doing here? But then, across the room, he appeared. The CEO. A man whose reputation preceded him, like thunder, commanding, enigmatic, unapproachable. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on her. There was an unmistakable spark, a flash of recognition that froze the breath in her lungs. When he finally approached, lowering his voice so only she could hear, the words slipped out like a secret shared between two souls adrift. "You shouldn't feel out of place," he whispered. "You've fought wars they could never understand." Her heart thundered against ribs that had known only hardship. The tremble that coursed through her was not from fear, but from a flicker of hope, a promise born in an unlikely moment at an elite wedding. Isla's journey was not about riches or status. It was about dignity reclaimed and battles won in the quiet moments, away from the spotlight. The whisper was a lifeline, a reminder that some scars are invisible, yet define the fiercest strength. The crowded room ebbed away as memories flooded her mind. Nights spent working 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads, the sting of rejection and solitude, the bittersweet triumph of every small victory. The CEO's voice grounded her, yet propelled her forward toward a new beginning. What followed was a night threaded with unspoken truths and delicate glances, each echoing the silent stories they carried alone. She saw in him a mirror of resilience, a man accustomed to judgments yet refusing to lose himself. The wedding faded into a backdrop of possibility, a watershed between loneliness and connection. In that whispered moment, Isla felt her world shift. Her story was no longer just about surviving. It was about embracing the strength that had always lived within her, waiting to be acknowledged. The whispers of gossip dimmed against the louder narrative of courage and redemption. She would no longer be an invisible figure on the periphery but a woman standing tall, trembles, replaced with determination, ready to own her place not just at elite weddings but in life itself. The CEO's words were not mere comfort, they were a call to rise beyond circumstance, to reclaim her power in a society eager to define her by her flaws. Golden light of the setting sun filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors as Isla made her way to the garden patio. The air was fragrant with blooms, jasmine and roses, and yet the perfume couldn't mask the sting of unease curling in her stomach. Everyone else seemed wrapped in ease, their laughter and elegant melody she felt out of sync with. As mothers and daughters in silks whispered behind fans, and couples shared private smiles, Isla's gaze drifted to her son, who played on the far lawn. His joy lit a fire deep within her, a reason to keep moving forward despite the doubts that haunted her. She was not the woman who had once believed life was a solitary struggle. Tonight, the world had cracked open just enough to let a shard of something new glow. The CEO's whisper had stirred something fragile but undeniable, a seed of possibility. Then, unexpectedly, he returned. This time his words were softer, but carried weight. "I know what it's like to feel invisible in a room full of shining stars. But you shine differently. Don't let anyone dim that." Isla's breath caught. How could a stranger see the turmoil she had hidden behind a practiced smile? There, in that quiet bubble between whispered vows and sparkling chandeliers, she felt seen not just as a single mother wrestling with loneliness, but as a woman of strength and worth. The night deepened, and with it, her resolve. This encounter was a turning point. A reminder: no whisper, no glance, no moment was too small to change the course of a life. She vowed to stop hiding in the shadows of others' expectations and to claim her light. Her dignity, hard-won and precious, could no longer be reduced to a mere whisper. That evening, among opulence and legacy, Isla discovered the quiet power of a single whispered truth and a vision of hope that trembled brilliantly in her heart. Tonight marked a turning point, a new chapter etched in whispered promises and quiet strength. Isla's son would see his mother not just as a survivor, but as a beacon of unwavering resolve. The elite wedding was no longer a symbol of exclusion, but the stage for a genuine beginning. She stepped forward, no longer trembling in the shadows but casting her own light, fierce and undeniable. The promise in that whisper sustained her, an indelible mark of honor forged in moments others overlooked. This was her night, her story reborn in the echo of a breath, the power of a whisper, that set her trembling heart ablaze with hope. Isla's thoughts spiraled as the evening shadows lengthened. The laughter around her was a distant echo, detached from the heavy weight pressing her shoulders down. The wedding's glitz and glamour only magnified the invisible walls built around her life. Walls forged from sacrifices, pain, and the lonely nights she refused to share. She remembered the early mornings, juggling endless shifts to make ends meet. The ache of absence when her son's laughter was the only light in their small, worn apartment. Society's harsh judgments had tried to define her, a single mother, alone, struggling, often overlooked. But tonight, the CEO's whispered words lingered like a melody, counterpoint to the chorus of doubt within. His recognition was more than politeness. It was validation of her silent battles, unseen by a world quick to dismiss her worth. She found herself wandering near the rose bushes, their delicate petals reminding her that beauty could emerge in hardship. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with the stirring hope born of unlikely kindness. The whispers of judgment morphed into a quiet resolve. This night was no longer about what she lacked, but the strength she had amassed. In the privacy of that garden corner, she forged a promise to herself, a vow that loneliness would no longer dictate her story. Her son's smile was her beacon, his future her mandate. If life had taught her anything, it was resilience. Through every setback and whispered slight, she had grown fiercer. The garden lights flickered on, illuminating the path ahead. The luxury surrounding her felt less like a cage and more like a stage, a place where she could step into power and rewrite her narrative. The CEO's whispered truth became a touchstone, a reminder that in a world obsessed with appearances, real strength came from facing life's trials with dignity. In that silent vow, Isla found the courage to believe that this wedding night, a symbol of union and new beginnings, was the dawn of her own redemption. The wedding festivities continued around her, a swirl of laughter, clinking glasses, and music that danced through the halls. Yet Isla felt detached, as if she floated just beyond the light, an observer in a world she was no longer part of. Memories tugged at her heart's edges, the times she gave up dreams, sacrificed comfort, and bore the silent weight of judgment alone. She thought of the nights spent wrapped in a thinning blanket, counting pennies to buy her son a birthday gift. The ache of loneliness, when friends moved on with their lives, leaving her behind. Society painted her story with broad strokes of pity or disdain, rarely seeing the fierce spirit beneath. Tonight, though, something inside shifted. The CEO's whispered words echoed not just as kindness, but as a recognition of battles fought in shadows. It was a call to reclaim her narrative, to rise beyond isolation and shame. She remembered the lessons carved from hardship, the power of resilience, the necessity of hope, and the unwavering love for her son that fueled her every step. This night was a crossroads, a subtle yet powerful pivot from survival to reclamation. Discreet glances from other guests tried to unravel her composure, but her resolve hardened. Isla was not here to prove them wrong, but to prove to herself that dignity could not be stolen by circumstance. She walked through the garden again, each step lighter than the last. The fragrance of blooming roses mingled with the hum of whispered conversations, but she felt a quiet strength blooming within her heart. The whispered secret from the CEO was more than a moment, it was a spark, igniting a fresh determination. Isla would not be defined by the loneliness or hardships, but by the courage she summoned to stand tall amidst adversity. Her story was far from over. The night's events marked the turning point where humiliation gave way to hope, and doubt softened beneath the weight of newfound grace. For a single mother once trembling in isolation, the elite wedding was now the backdrop to a profound awakening the moment she began to rewrite her destiny. The strains of the string quartet softened into a gentle hum as Isla found herself drawn back into the heart of the celebration. But the luxury that once overwhelmed her now seemed a backdrop to her unfolding story, a story not of victimhood, but of quiet strength, crafted from every sleepless night and broken tear. Memories surfaced of harsh words thrown in judgment, the whispers behind closed doors that could have shattered her resolve. Yet here she stood, not defeated but defiant, a single mother who carried the weight of her world with grace and fierce determination. Her son's laughter from across the room was a balm, a reminder that every sacrifice had meaning. She recalled how she had fought for the small moments, bedtime stories, school events, scraped knees tended in the dark, and how each victory, no matter how small, was a testament to love's perseverance. Then, the CEO's presence returned not as a distant figure of power, but as a man who recognized her worth beyond social status. His whispered confidence was a lifeline thrown across the gulf of loneliness and doubt. "You've come far, Isla," he said softly. "The world may try to write your story for you, but only you hold the pen." His words settled over her like a shield. She saw in his eyes an understanding born of battles fought in silence, a recognition that strength often hides behind scars. The wedding's opulence no longer blinded her. Instead, she felt a quiet glow from within, a light kindled by resilience and the promise of a new beginning. Isla realized then that the night was more than a gathering of wealth and status. It was a canvas where her story of redemption was being painted stroke by careful stroke, proof that triumph often blooms in the shadows of hardship. With renewed courage, she stepped forward, ready to embrace whatever awaited, no longer trembling but standing tall, her heart brimming with hope and unshakable pride. As the night slowly wove on, Isla found herself somewhere between shadow and light, a space that reflected her own journey. The whispers and glances of the elite no longer held power over her. Instead, what resonated was a strength born from every trial she had weathered. She thought back to the darkest moments, when hope seemed a distant dream, sleepless nights filled with worry, the shame that social judgment tried to impose, and the loneliness that threatened to swallow her whole. But through it all, a fierce love for her son was her constant beacon. Her life was stitched together by scars and small victories alike, each one a testament to survival and an unyielding will. The CEO's whispered words were not just kindness. They were an acknowledgement of the fierce courage others often missed. In this glittering world of privilege and pretense, Isla was a reminder that true power is quieter but no less profound. It lives in the act of rising again when the world expects you to fall, in the decision to keep going despite every reason to stop. The wedding's grandeur faded from her mind, replaced by the clarity of purpose. She was no longer a lonely figure trembling in a sea of strangers. She was a woman reclaiming her story on her own terms. The path ahead was unclear, but her resolve was fixed. This was her moment to step from the margins and into the story she chose to write, one filled with dignity, hope, and unapologetic strength. Her son's bright laughter across the room was the promise she clung to, a future forged not by the world's judgment, but by her love and tenacity. Tonight was more than a wedding. It was a turning point, the whispered truth of a CEO igniting a fire, and the first step toward a life rewritten, Isla breathed deeply, her trembling replaced by a steady, fierce heartbeat. Block B final clean. The grand hall shimmered under crystal chandeliers as Isla took a deep breath, feeling the weight of countless eyes. Once, such attention might have left her shrinking into the shadows. But tonight marked a transformation. The lonely girl who had arrived earlier had begun to fade, replaced by a woman who carried scars with silent pride. Her story was not just about hardship, it was about fighting against the tides that sought to define her worth by circumstance. Every whispered judgment had become a stepping stone, every lonely moment a forge where resilience was refined. She recalled the CEO's voice, low and sincere, reminding her strengths often lived unseen. Those words sparked a quiet fire, melting away the shame tightly wrapped around her heart. It was a call to rise, not just for herself, but for her son, who deserved a mother unbroken by life's storms. As music swelled and guests danced, Isla found herself stepping lightly toward a destiny she had once believed impossible. The elite wedding no longer felt like a place of exclusion, but a backdrop for her reclamation. Her gaze met a mirror across the room, and for the first time, she saw a reflection of courage. Eyes bright with unspoken dreams, and a heart steady despite every fall. The trembling that had haunted her was now a subtle pulse of strength running through her veins. This night was a turning point. The whisper of a powerful man. A catalyst that unveiled who she really was. In that glance, she embraced a new narrative, one of dignity, hope, and unapologetic perseverance. Isla's journey was far from over, but this moment was hers. Against the backdrop of a world that once dismissed her, she stood tall, fearless in her truth, ready to face whatever lay ahead with grace and unwavering resolve. No longer the lonely single mom, she was a symbol of redemption, a woman who trusted her own strength and dared to step into the light. Block B final clean narration. The crescendo of the night's music filled the room, but Isla's mind was quiet, focused. She had crossed an invisible line from trembling uncertainty to a place where hope sparked fiercely within. The whispered words of the CEO echoed again, a reminder that her value was not measured by status or circumstance, but by the strength she carried inside. Guests floated past in elegant gowns and tailored suits. Yet Isla no longer felt like an outsider. She moved through the crowd with a new grace, the weight of judgment lifting with each step. Her son's bright smile, watching from a distance, was a constant reminder of what she fought for, the promise of a better future. Every hardship, every lonely night, every whispered slight had been transformed into a quiet power that she now held like a torch. Redemption was not a sudden gift, but a path forged by courage and relentless determination. The night stretched ahead, full of possibilities. For the first time in years, Isla allowed herself to dream beyond survival, of happiness, of respect, of a life unburdened by shame. The wedding was no longer a symbol of exclusion, but a testament to resilience. The CEO's whisper, once a fragile thread in the dark, had become a beacon, lighting her way forward. In this moment, surrounded by the glow of chandeliers and hopeful hearts, Isla embraced the woman she had become, strong, resolute, unafraid. Her journey was far from over, but she now walked it with a heart unshaken, a story reclaimed. No longer just a lonely single mom, Isla was a symbol of redemption, a living testament to the power of whispered truths and unwavering spirit. The night's final notes lingered in the air, carrying with them the promise of new beginnings and the quiet triumph of a soul reborn. Her past did not define her, her courage did. The night reached its turning point, a hush spreading through the grand hall as the couple shared their first dance, a swirl of silk and soft laughter. But Isla's heart beat in a rhythm all its own, a cadence born of the journey she had traveled. She stood apart, yet connected, a thread woven through the tapestry of celebration and secrets. The whispered words from the CEO lingered still, a constant companion in the quiet spaces between moments. Tonight was more than an event. It was the intersection where past wounds met hopeful tomorrows. Every whispered doubt and judgment dissolved beneath the steady light rising within her, a light fueled by resilience and love. Isla's son tugged lightly at her hand, pulling her from the reverie. His eyes shone with trust and pride, a reminder that her story was his foundation. The world beyond the ballroom might still carry whispers and sideways glances, but here and now, she was a woman reclaiming her dignity. The wedding, a symbol of union and new beginnings, had become the backdrop for her own transformation, a testament to the power of whispered truths and the unyielding strength of the human spirit. As the night wore on, Isla resolved to embrace this new chapter fully. The tremble that had once shaken her was replaced by a steady pulse of determination. She would no longer let the world's judgments define her. Her story was hers to write, marked by courage, hope, and the quiet triumph of a heart reborn. No longer just a silent observer, Isla stepped into the light, ready to face whatever the future held with grace and unwavering resolve. Her journey was a beacon for those who felt unseen, a reminder that sometimes the smallest whisper can ignite the fiercest flame. Tonight was not an end, but a beginning, a promise whispered in the shadows and carried boldly into the dawn. As the night drew to a close, Isla stood beneath the stars, the cool air filling her lungs with a fresh sense of possibility. The trembling she had felt upon arrival was gone, replaced by a steady heartbeat aligned with newfound strength. The whispers of the CEO, once a gentle encouragement, had become a powerful anthem that would carry her forward. This elite wedding, once a symbol of exclusion, had transformed into a sanctuary of redemption and hope. Isla's journey, marked by hardship and perseverance, had culminated in a moment of quiet triumph. She had reclaimed not just her dignity, but her story. Her son's laughter echoed softly in her memory, a reminder that every sacrifice was worth it, every battle fought for a future brighter than the past. The world might still whisper, judge, or overlook her, yet she knew her worth was unshakable. Isla smiled, embracing the darkness and light that shaped her. She was no longer just a lonely single mom trembling in the shadows, but a woman who stepped boldly into her power. The life ahead was uncertain, beautiful, and hers to create. Tonight was the closing of one chapter and the opening of another, a promise whispered in the quiet moments of struggle that blossomed into a radiant dawn. Whatever challenges awaited, she would meet them with grace, courage, and an unyielding heart. The CEO's words had sparked a fire, but it was her own resilience that would sustain the flame. Isla's story was no longer defined by loneliness or fear, but by a courage that refused to be silenced. She turned toward the future, her spirit unbroken, her path illuminated by the whisper that left her trembling, now a roar within her soul. This was her redemption, her beginning, her endless possibility.